Well, one of the things that we're fighting here in Oklahoma City, we have a radio show called Radio Free Oklahoma, and we try to get the information out about the upcoming swine flu vaccines. You hear that Northcom is coordinating with Fema to work for the mandatory vaccinations. There's all the legal framework in place through the Patriot Acts and the Emergency Medical Powers Act to force these vaccines on people. And then if you deny it, where are you going to go? Well, they say that you can be charged with a felony or put into a quarantine area. Now it's starting to come into view how these camps could be used.
Well, today we're in a circumstance where the economic and the political dynamics are pushing America and the whole world into a crisis dynamic. This crisis is being created through the process of sustainable development policy. Several things are occurring. One is that our system of justice is being changed. We're shifting from equal justice, where every human being has certain unalienable rights to life, liberty, and property, etc., to a system of social justice where no one has any such right, but where people are judged based upon the group that they're part of.
When Franklin Delano Roosevelt signed Executive Order 9066, we were all rounded up like cattle and placed into America's concentration camps. They had designated areas where people would report, and they were transported by bus to they called them assembly centers. They didn't have facilities to house 120,000 persons, so they took over racetracks, fairgrounds, places like that. Work in the camp was slave labor. In fact, they had us making camouflage nets for the United States Army. Now that was absolutely slave labor. Later on I said we should all have refused to work and then let the Army and the government come in and do all the chores that had to be done. But as I said, we had lost not only our life and liberty, but also our finances. I have to say that there were at least 10 persons shot and killed by American guards simply because they got too close to the barbed wire fence that was surrounding the camps. Native-born American citizens like myself were denied life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness in total violation of all the Constitution, the Bill of Rights, and so forth. Every morning the children would stand up, face the American flag with liberty and justice for all. Psychologically, it really affected us. That's why, for example, I mentioned earlier on that there were many parents who never even told their children that they had been in concentration camps because they were ashamed. We should not be ashamed. It was the United States government that should be totally ashamed of their behavior and putting 120,000 persons of Japanese ancestry in America's concentration camps. And you have to be alert because it can happen again.
We do know that 28% of their funding comes from the Department of Homeland Security. This is not the first time that a report has been issued to Missouri law enforcement and surrounding fusion centers in other states by the MIAC Center. This right here is a stack of every single one of the MIAC reports that has been drafted. MIAC Alert, Constitution Rangers, June 7th, 2007. You've got the Black Separatism Bulletin, November 4th, 2008, American Radical Islam Converts. Here's the MIAC Strategic Report dated 11/28/2008 on the anarchist movement. You've got it on the Modern Committees of Safety, Voice of the People, or Militias in Disguise. That's January 9, 2009, which came out right before the infamous MIAC Strategic Report on the Modern Militia Movement. So they've been producing these documents for quite some time. If the people profiled in this document could be considered a potential threat to law enforcement, they could be considered a potential domestic terrorist. And if you have the word terrorist attached to your name, whether it is domestic or foreign, the Patriot Act still applies to you, whether you're an American citizen or not.
I remind you that before the Nazis began to persecute and incarcerate and kill and so forth the Jewish people in Germany, the first thing they did was label them as extremists and fanatics and all these kind of things and get the people conditioned against them. And then with the approbation of the general populace, they were able to unleash the fury of the state against them, and we all of course know what happened as a result of that.
It's one thing for them to make sure you don't have a gun or a bomb in your pocket. It's another thing for them to not like a book.
This is the first time that a report such as this actually named individuals. Once you label someone an extremist, a potential militia member, terrorist, whatever term is used, for some people the moniker will remain. Before you can persecute people, before you can incarcerate large numbers of people, you have to marginalize them. You have to create the image that these people are dangerous to society, or they're extremists or radicals. Call them what you will. but marginalize them from the mainstream of society, so that at that point the rest of society will accept the persecution that might result upon this group. It's been an age-old strategy that's worked in every totalitarian regime in the history of the world, and that's why we're concerned here in the United States when we see this kind of marginalization going on about people who voted for Ron Paul. Why are they being marginalized? Why are they being singled out as a potential danger to society? And I think it's shades of the strategies and tactics of totalitarian regimes in history past, and that should never happen in this country.
People were being profiled and stopped if they had certain kind of bumper stickers on their car, like a Ron Paul bumper sticker or a Chuck Baldwin supporter. As you read the Make report, bits and pieces that were lifted right out of the Project Megiddo report back in 1999 by the FBI, describing what terrorists were, how law enforcement could identify potential terrorists. And I can remember back in the 90s, the FBI was doing an education program with local law enforcement, and what they had was a trifold pamphlet. Again, this was not meant for public consumption, only to be passed around amongst the rank and file and the police. It ran through the list of what a potential terrorist might be or what they might prescribe to. And the list is kind of interesting. If you were a supporter of the Constitution, if you were an ardent supporter of the Second Amendment, or even if you were person of deep religious conviction, you might be a member of a certain cult. And going back to Project Megiddo, it's all basically the same thing. That if you have any strong beliefs in anything, that you could be a possible threat, that the government would fear its own people so much that they would be talking about detaining people or incarcerating them or vetting them or investigating them or whatever. This whole thing has been turned on its head. So anytime that you can demonstrate the power of government and you want to condition people into a way of thinking or to intimidate them or make them fearful, do actions that are going to put the fear of government and authority in people's hearts, strike that chord and make them shut up. Just when people in this country should be doing exactly the opposite, because I don't even recognize this country anymore.
The government doesn't build things that are not needed or that there aren't contingency plans that say there's a reason for them.
Also, it's been reported by WorldNet Daily that the Department of Homeland Security has already awarded nearly a $400 million contract to Halliburton to build some temporary detention centers on an as-needed basis.
Another way is to have an economic collapse that's fabricated. Okay, you cut lending from banks. Nobody has any money anymore. The economy tanks. Okay, then you've got massive people homeless everywhere. Then there's a problem. Economic collapse. The reaction is people get desperate and need a home. Solution is we present a home to you, which is the FEMA camp, which will be advertised as a wonderful place. Of course, it's a lie. So what you have there is they fabricate a problem to create reactions, which gives the solution they originally wanted in the beginning, which was to get everybody into the FEMA camps. That's how this is the story of history. It's happened over and over and over.
They're going to show people getting the free concert or the Sunday night movie or the free medical care, and they're going to be beating down the doors to get in the camps. And so you go point them out and go, look, the barbed wire's facing in.
Why would Americans, under the guise and the threat of worldwide terrorism, why would they willingly give up or relinquish their rights to government when our rights did not come from government in the first place? Our rights merely came from God. They were enumerated by the government, put in the Bill of Rights as a reminder not to us, but those in power as to not violate them.
Just how far are you willing to go before you stand up and say no more to the federal government?
It doesn't matter which party you put in charge of the White House or Congress, nothing of substance changes. I really think the power and strength of the people rests where it always has rested, and that is with the states.
So we need to start putting some teeth into our state laws, and we need to be electing sheriffs that are going to protect us from federal agents when they initially don't understand this because their civics lessons weren't very good in school.
The 10th Amendment very clearly says any authority not granted to the federal government by the Constitution belongs to we the people and the sovereign states that make up this union.
Our founders actually intended for the federal government to be very small and limited, and that most of the service of government was to be done in the states. So I think there's probably a growing conflict between states and the federal government. And I think there's some really good reason for the federal government to be concerned right now, because I think there are a lot of people in the United States that are beginning to say, where are we going to draw the line in the sand and say no more?
Every generation faces tyranny. Every generation faces corruption, and it's forced to stand up against it or become enslaved. Our ancestors fought and died so that we'd have the little bit of liberty we have now. It is a sacred treasure. And from liberty comes all prosperity.
And if you do treasure the notion that your rights are unalienable, meaning imbued in you by our Creator, and you want to defend the American circumstance, the only way we can effectively battle the Agenda 21 protocol is to do it locally.
We have the checks and balances in the states to be able to maintain the freedom of our people.
You get involved in your local area. I mean, that's where you can affect the most change. All you have to do is get started. Take that first step, and then you'll find that you get this momentum, and you can't stop it.
We are the government.
Do whatever you can to get involved and get to know what is happening in your state. Are they watching people in your state and sending information up to FBI and Homeland Security? Are you going to be profiled in a report issued by your state?
Just be alert, study your Constitution, learn all you can. I think there's certain basic organic documents that you need to become familiar with. I would start with the Mayflower Compact. The next one I would urge you to read is Patrick Henry's famous speech where he ended by saying, "Give me liberty or give me death." Certainly the Declaration of Independence is one it's a philosophical framework. The Constitution came along after that to be actually the blueprint or the framework of a building built upon the ideas espoused in the Declaration of Independence. You must read the Federalist Papers and the Anti-Federalist Papers, Northwest Ordinance, George Washington's Farewell Address. These are the organic documents from which we came, and it basically expressed who we were when we attained to greatness. It's who we need to go back to. On top of that, there are many other really important books to read to understand your enemy. And I would suggest The Shadows of Power by James Perloff, Creature from Jekyll Island by G. Edward Griffin. Another one actually written by one of the enemies, in my opinion, is Carol Quigley's Tragedy and Hope. So read those books, study and all to know what we are, but also equip yourself with understanding of who your enemy is, because we're in a struggle for our future at this point in time.